The other things I witnessed when I was out there, there's a small village called Susia, and right on the edge of this village, there's a shepherd, an elderly man and his wife with their flock of sheep. And 25 soldiers, their DCO and the JCB digger machine came down, demolished his tent and took everything away from them.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. A report from the International Middle East Media Center. This is a photo of Mohammed Hassan. On July 3rd, he and some workers were at a home he was building for his family in the northern West Bank. Dozens of settlers attacked, throwing rocks at Hassan and the workers. They were assisted by Israeli soldiers who cordoned off the area and let the settlers attack. Hassan then went into the house, locked the doors, and went on the roof. He began throwing things at the attackers. Then Israeli soldiers shot him 3 times in the chest, killing him. After that, settlers broke into the house and smashed household furniture and construction equipment. The matter did not end there. The soldiers kidnapped the body. They took it away and would not return it to his family. On the day we record, July 9th, there was a peaceful march of protest. The demand was that the body be returned to his family. Israeli soldiers opened fire with rubber bullets and tear gas, injuring 54 people. What follows is a Palestinian home being blown up on orders of the Israeli government. This took place on July 8th. The home belonged to an American citizen named Muntasir Shalabi. He had been arrested for taking part in an attack some months earlier in which an Israeli man was killed. Shalabi had not been put on trial, let alone been found guilty. No court decided that he had to hand over property. Just the same, the Israelis blew up the family home. Israel rejects modern standards of justice, using collective punishment, a tool of tyrants. I'll tell you whose homes were not blown up. Those of the Israeli Jews who burned Mohammed al-Haider alive, or those who firebombed a house in Dura, which burned 4 Palestinians to death. The home demolition penalty is only given to Palestinians. This is what it means for Israel to be an apartheid society. And now the second part of my interview with Nick Georges, the British man who climbed a 300-foot crane in the heart of London to try to dramatize Palestinian suffering. Last week, we talked about his amazing climb and his 37 hours up on top of the crane. Today, we start with Nick giving tribute to Sarah Wilkerson, who let the media know about his effort. And then he talks about how his trips to the Middle East drove him to make that dramatic climb.
And it's down to her that she brought that whole action alive. And all Al Jazeera, Middle East Eye, Press TV, The Struggle, apparently we've had over 3 million hits on that video.
Wow.
And I've had over 400 direct responses of gratitude direct from Gaza to me for what I've done. So even if nothing else, just those responses from Gaza and the feeling that I've given them made it worthwhile. And Sarah was responsible for all that. So it really was, I had to do my crane bit, but her bit was equally important to make it all worthwhile. So, and also because she was the liaison, she was the only person the police could speak to me through, because she had my phone number, which she wouldn't give to the police. So all the messages had to be relayed through her. And she had a very difficult job because the police tried to remove all the media people from below. They tried to kick her off the site. And then eventually they realized that she was the only person they could communicate with me through. So they then let her back on again. And they were getting very aggressive with her. They were telling her that they were going to move the crane with me on top of it, precariously balanced on the top, which should have been lethal. They were going to get a helicopter down, but the downdraft would have blown the crane about and probably blown me off. And they were demanding that I came down, and they were getting very heavy.
Now, the Daily Express, the British papers said, quote, "You were hauled down by police." Is that true?
No, this is complete lies and fabrication. And I'll explain what actually happened. When Sarah told me on the phone that they were going to move the crane, I said to her to tell them specifically, if they move that crane 1 inch, I said, I'm going to stand up right on the top. I'm going to take my safety harness off completely. And I said, if the police move the crane, that will be their total responsibility. So the two policemen on the ground then phoned their chief superintendent behind a desk somewhere. And he got furious with them. And Sarah could hear this on the loudspeaker thing. And he said, how can you be so stupid? Don't move the crane. Don't stress him. And I'd already agreed to come down an hour earlier anyway, because they wanted me to come down earlier. He said, he's already compromised in the time he's coming down. Don't stress him. Just leave him in peace and let him come down at his own time, at his own speed, whenever he's happy to come down. Apparently, they'd asked one of the police teams to go up. None of the police teams would go up, which is why I'd chosen this crane, because I knew it would be almost impossible for them to get me down from there. There was no way they could get me down. It was far too high for any ladders or any aerial platforms to get up there. They couldn't get a crane big enough to get near to it. It would take them 3 or 4 days to get anything that size in and rigged. So I knew there was absolutely no way they could actually get to me there.
So when did you decide to come down?
So then I decided actually it was coming down at 5, but 3:45, I started feeling a bit bad from the sun because I hadn't been able to carry enough weight. I hadn't had enough water up there with me. I'd had very little food because of the weight problem. And I suddenly started to feel the effects of the really boiling hot sun. So I thought, right, this is not a good place to be ill because they'll never get me down. So what I did straight away, I'd saved half a litre of water. I had that. I had my last snack bar. I waited 10 minutes till it had gone through my system. And then I started coming down. And I came down really slowly, really careful, completely unstressed, absolutely in my own time with no one hassling me or putting me under pressure. I had my safety harness, and it took me quite a long time to get down. And it was interesting because afterwards, Sarah said on the ground, there were about 400 people below there watching. She said there was absolute silence when I was climbing down. She said the police turned their radios off. She said the whole building site came to a halt. They all came over and watched. And she said you could have heard a pin drop as I was climbing down that jib. And then finally, when I got to the bottom, they all broke out cheering. And
Wow.
yeah. So,
I didn't see video of that. I hope it is there somewhere.
probably.
What about the Palestinian flag? Did you leave it up flying?
Well, of course I left that up there, and I've no idea. I don't know what they did about getting it down, but the longer it can fly up there, the better. So my flag is still up there, definitely. And my cat's cradle all wrapped around there. So yes, yeah. So that's all still there. But the police were waiting for me when I came down. And believe it or not, I've never been so pleased to see a policeman in my life. I was so relieved to have safely got down. To the whole thing was successful. No police, nobody else had risked their lives or anything. Mm-hmm. And I got down safely. And I got down onto the ground and my legs went from under me. I collapsed on top of this policeman and I burst into tears on his shoulder, poor man. So yeah, I was very, very pleased to get down. Yes. Yeah.
They did arrest you.
Yes, well, what they did, because they've had a lot of deaths in custody, so they're very concerned about the health of people before they put them in custody. They tried to get an ambulance, but they couldn't. So they put me in a police van and they blue lighted me all the way to St George's Hospital, where I was checked over. And then they took me back to Wandsworth Police Station. They arrested me, read me the Riot Act and everything. And I was put in a cell overnight, and they finally released me in the afternoon of the next day. They did charge me, but I think they charged me with 4 things, but I really wasn't paying that much attention. The main charge, from what I can gather, was that I went prepared to break in with a pair of bolt croppers, and that I did damage in that I cut this rusty chain. So I think that's their main charge against me. But I mean, other than that, all I actually did was climb a crane and fly a country's flag. So I don't think I don't know. I mean, you know, with Boris Johnson and his anti-protest bill now, who knows what they're going to do to me.
How did you first get interested in Palestine?
Well, it's a bit of a funny story. When I was 17, I left home and I rode my motorbike and cycle overland to Cape Town, South Africa. Well, it took me 1.5 years. I got a bit lost on the way and I ended up in Beirut. And as you know, Beirut's not really on the way to Cape Town. I don't quite know how that happened. Anyway, the main road into Beirut was lined with derelict concrete shacks, falling down wooden sheds, miles of torn and tattered tents, filth, squalor, piles of rubbish, hundreds of filthy kids and children. And I was just 17, just fresh out of school. I'd never seen anything like this in my life. And of course, this was all the Palestinian refugees who had been forced out of Palestine by the Israeli invasion of the Palestinians' own country. And I was shocked and horrified by it. And for 50 years, the Palestinians have been on my heart, but typical me, I've never done anything about it. I've moaned and whinged, but I never did anything. And then about 6 years ago, I got to become a Christian. And that finally, in effect, gave me the boot up the backside to think, right, I really want to try and do something about this. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, little old Nick, what on earth can he do? And I looked on the internet and I asked about, and eventually a friend put me in touch with an organization that sent people out to Palestine for 2 weeks as a olive halving and protective presence for the Palestinians. Mm-hmm. And my God, what an eye-opener that was. And then I joined.
What year was that, Nick? What year?
That was about 4 years ago. So that 3 years ago. Yeah, about 3 years ago. And then I came back from that, and I was very fortunate. After years training, I was accepted by this organization, and I was sent out to Palestine for 3 months as a humanitarian witness. And that was just horrific. For 3 months, every day on a daily basis, I witnessed the atrocities and the horrors of the illegal Israeli occupation of the Palestinian homeland. And it was just awful. The worst thing I saw, I was taken to the site of this incident. The incident had occurred about 2 years previously, and it was a burnt out shell of a house. And there was a guide who witnessed the whole incident, who lived about 50 meters away, and he took me there. And a Palestinian family of 4, a mum, a dad, the little boy, and the baby, were asleep in the bedroom. A group of about 12 Jewish extremist settlers came down with an incendiary device they'd got from the Israeli army. They lobbed this incendiary device through the bedroom window of this family while they were asleep. The family woke up on fire. The mother grabbed the baby out of the cot. They rushed out of the house, only to discover that they were still on fire because this incendiary device had white phosphorus in it. The mother realized in a panic she'd just grabbed the blankets and not the baby. The settlers were out there waiting for them with axes to hack them down. The mother died that night. The father died the next day. The next day, the Palestinians gained access and they went in to get the remains of the child out. The heat from this incendiary device was so intense that the body had been completely incinerated. There was no trace of the child. It had melted the aluminium window frames, and the guy had actually rubbed a bit of aluminium off the frame, gave me this bit of melted aluminium. I've still got it at home now.
Where was this? Where in the West?
This was in a village. This was in a village in the West Bank called Duma. It's quite a well-known incident, and there are lots of different stories about it. But that is the true story about it, which was told to me by the Palestinian guide who lived 50 meters away, who witnessed the event. There are lots of different stories about it, but that is the story I was told by that guide.
Uh-huh. That left a mark on you, obviously.
Another time while I was witnessing, and the demolition, well, what happened when I got back to England, my behaviour was very strange. And in the end, my kids forced me to go to the doctor. And the doctor instantly diagnosed me with PTSD from it, which is quite a price to pay. The other things I witnessed when I was out there, there's a small village called Sousia, and right on the edge of this village, there's a shepherd, an elderly man and his wife with their flock of sheep. And 25 soldiers, their DCO and the JCB digger machine came down, demolished his tent and took everything away from them. Anyway, a few weeks later, the Palestinian got another tent. He came back with his sheep and he carried on shepherding there. Anyway, while I was there, 4 times, 25 soldiers, the DCO, the JCB machine, in the 3 months I was there, came down to demolish his tent and his home. And the last time, he didn't even put a tent up. He put a tiny little box that his wife and himself could just squeeze into to sleep at night. But they had to build a shelter, a very ramshackle shelter with a canvas top, just to keep the sun off the sheep. The last time the Israeli army came down, they dismantled and wrecked his shelter for the sheep. And I've got this lovely video of the Israeli DCO speaking to this poor shepherd, saying, look, this is a female DCO, she said, if I come down 4 times, I've been down to demolish your home. If I come down 1 more time, your work permit will be revoked and you and all your family will be put on the blacklist, which is like a death sentence. And if they can't work, they can't survive, they can't do anything, they're never issued any permits, they can't go anywhere. It's more or less like, so the poor shepherd gave up, he went back to the refugee camp in Yatta.
Here's notice of a rally on Wednesday, July 14th in Hartford, an attempt to override Governor Lamont's veto of a bill that would end the use of solitary confinement as punishment. See last week's show for an interview on this subject with Leighton Johnson of Stop Solitary, Connecticut. Well, the ground troops are leaving Afghanistan. 2,500 American dead, enormous numbers of Afghan dead. Remember back to 2001 when the peace movement warned that going into Afghanistan with an invading force was not a good thing? We were laughed at and yelled at and threatened for our lack of patriotism. Well, the military did its thing for 20 years. Was it a wise thing to do? Does the corporate media ask that question? On July 27th, this man will be sentenced for a crime. No, not for sending soldiers to Afghanistan, but for sending documents about drone assassinations to the U.S. media. Daniel Hale is an Air Force veteran who worked in the drone program and who felt guilty about all the people he helped kill. He's facing 10 years in prison for violating the Espionage Act, and the judge forbids him from even explaining why he acted the way he did. Aren't you glad you live in a free country? For more, go to standwithdanielhale.org. On June 27th, there was a vigil for Mubarak Soulemane in West Haven, protesting the killing by a state trooper 17 months ago of the young man who was surrounded by police and trooper cars. West Haven police also took part in the incident.
He passed away here at this very scene, and we're just here, to talk about his life, remember his life, and acknowledge the movement and the accountability that Justice for Mubarak is looking for. So thank you for that. To start it off, I'm gonna have a moment of silence for my brother's life lost. We're gonna have a moment of silence. Thank you. I'm Marianne. Mubarak was my brother. It is good to see so many gathered here in the embrace of community and remembrance of my brother Mubarak. He would have been 21 on June 24th. Our family of 5 would have celebrated at the Cheesecake Factory per usual. The waiters would come out singing happy birthday and Mubarak would look away flustered. We'd laugh, but that would be the case this year, or all the years to come, because of the brutal way in which my brother's life was taken on January 15th by State Trooper Brian North. Because of him, I won't get to see my brother graduate from college. To hear him say, "Yo, Mariam, when we going to Europe, you gotta take me to Spain." I won't get to hear his laughter fill the room, or him tease me for being too uptight sometimes. Relax, Mariam. I won't get to see where his ambitions would have taken him, but I'm 100% confident his dreams to pursue international business would have been seen through. He would have found him a beautiful, significant other that he cared so deeply for, and been blessed with so many children, so many caring children, because he was the most caring, the most patient, and the most family-oriented gentleman. We all know the real justice would be Mubarak alive to see all those things through. For him to be here today to celebrate his own birthday. But unfortunately, that was taken away from him, which leaves my family and I having to pursue the next best thing. A pursuit of some semblance of justice. We want State Attorney Michael Gaylor to release a verdict that clearly points the finger at a murderer and holds him accountable. This murderer being State Trooper Brian North. Say his name, Brian North.
Brian North!
Our efforts consist of getting him fired, charged, and convicted. He stole from us. He stole from all of us. An entire life, 7 gunshots, right where we stand. It gives me chills to this day. Another human taking the life of another human within seconds.
Let me explain to you what happened on January 15th in 3 sentences. Troopers and police surrounded a black youth with their cars. He did not instantly obey them. They shot him dead. That sums up the whole matter. The whole matter that they've been investigating for 17 long months. About a year ago, on July 5th, there was a peaceful rally up to the West Haven police station protesting about Mubarak Soulemane. The rally was over. People went back to their cars, marched in the street, and then out of nowhere, a woman drove into the marchers, and those who weren't able to get out of the way were hit slightly by her. Obviously, understandably, the marchers wanted to make sure she stopped. The police came. Lots of police came, not just West Haven, but from Milford and other communities. And the police brought out dogs. And they took the woman home, they escorted her, And to the marchers, they terrified with the dogs, and they arrested some of them.
My name is Victoria. I'm a member of Justice for Jason and Grown out in Bridgeport. And I just wanted to really quickly speak on what we're doing out in Bridgeport as far as abolition is concerned, to speak to what Kara was just talking about with building new systems of public safety. And I just want to reiterate to speak to what Kara was saying about how abolition is really about building, and it's really about safety for all people. And change happens over time, and we need to start now building new systems. So out in Bridgeport, we're trying to put together integrated crisis intervention teams who would be led by qualified community members to respond to non-violent mental health calls instead of the police. It would also provide jobs for people in the east end of Bridgeport. And there are places in the country that are already doing this. So there's Cahoots, I think they're in Oregon, and then there's Star out in Denver. But we don't need to remake the wheel. We can bring these systems here to Connecticut. I study in school public health, health equity, urban affairs, and I also specialize in mental health care. I actually went to the same school as Mubarak. I went to Gateway Community College at the same time as him. And I just did a big project through the Honor Society to refund our wellness center because we didn't have a single licensed mental health counselor left. So mental health is health. I'm just out here to advocate for that and let you know that the same type of systems we're building in Bridgeport, we also need them here in West Haven. We need them everywhere in all communities. And justice for Mubarak.
My name is Justin Farmer. I'm a city councilor in Hamden. I've been out to West Haven multiple times, right? And I think the thing that saddens me most is that, like Mubarak, I am a black man, and I happen to have a neurological disorder, right? Different, but struggling with my own health, right? And there are times where there is what people would see as irregular and not normal can be a death sentence, right? But we know we don't need something like that. It could be something as simple as having a $20 bill. It could be something as simple as getting Skittles. It could be something like getting in a car accident and daring to ask for help. But I want to focus on the culture of West Haven and then zoom out to the culture of Connecticut. Mubarak was a Muslim man who suffered from mental illness, who was a great student, a great friend, a great advocate. And he was shot and killed with 7 pulls of a trigger by the state police. There was a Turkish sister who was killed several years ago as she was abused by her husband, and she had reached out to the police department, begged and asked for help. And instead, this police department, the West Haven Police Department, spent their time mocking her name, mocking her culture, and she was killed. And you had the city say $3 million is a good settlement. That this woman and her children will go without her. You have the fact that the police are trained in such a way to see us as combatants. Right here in West Haven. And then last year we had the West Haven police allow someone to hit people with a car. After we all watched Heather here die, the West Haven police just wrote it off. But I think the thing that really bothers me is as across this state we talk about racism as a public health crisis, as we talk about the need for public health, that the governor and our elected leaders can talk about everything that happens everywhere else, but they can't talk about what's happening here.
That's right.
State Representative Robin Port. I represent the 94th District, Hamden and New Haven. My first time being out here. And I'm so sick of these vigils. I'm so sick of the killing. You know, we're putting laws on the books to address this, but what I really want is the people in the community, elected officials, hold us accountable. You know, because the laws don't stop this from happening. But it does guarantee lawful and legal recourse when it happens. And it's actions such as these and so much more that really need to happen. It's time for that to stop. And shame on West Haven for not doing anything about a woman who took her vehicle and brought harm to innocent people peacefully protesting. Shame on West Haven PD. That's what I'll say out loud. It's time for us to have real justice, you know, and this feel-good fabrication of, you know, declaring racism as a public issue, that ain't good enough, because that's just words. Words on paper. We need for it to be more than that. We need for it to be about the business of doing something, not saying something. And we've seen it over and over again. This has been going on for centuries, y'all. Centuries. And my heart and soul goes out to you and your family. I'm a mother and a grandmother. A son and a grandson. And it gives me chills standing here because I know it could be my babies that we're out here for, easily. It could be me we're out here for. And only because of the color of our skin.
That's our program for today. See you next week at this time. I'm Stanley Heller for The Struggle.